Thanks for joining us again. We're going to do a bit of an open Q&A. I want to call it Ask Me Anything. We've got Richard and both Aziz on the panel here, as well as Ian and myself. So we've got a couple of questions here. I mean, looking at here, I'm going to throw out the first question based on order. What percentage of projects are using the process at Z Modular? And I guess that's a bit of an open question. So, I mean, Richard or Aziz, what percentage do you guys see from your roles in the AC industry are, I guess, maybe in Ontario or in Canada, modular based?
What percentage of projects?
Yeah. I mean, and Z Modular, clearly all projects are, but
well,
from...
yeah, we are a modular company, so we just build modular. But in terms of what percentage of projects are modular, it's going to be very tough to say. Like overall modular, the overall AEC industry, modular is just beginning. We are not even at a 3% of the overall AEC industry project, right? So just touching the, even not the surface of it. Like we have had some good contracts on some hospitality hotel projects, and then student housing, and we are just talking about affordable housing projects and seniors homes. But then given the situation that we are all in with COVID, a lot of hotel projects have gone on a pause. But one thing I would like to mention is throughout this period, throughout this process of what the whole world is going through, the future projects have gone into pause, but the project in production, in manufacturing, had not a single day setback. The plant continued for production, the design process continued on. We did not had a single day of offline.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And Richard, I mean, from your perspective, given that you're working on a lot of facilities and infrastructure related projects with the transit authorities, do you see, in foreseeable future that they end up going in more modular, based workflows, or even your practice today? Can you see yourselves in working in modular?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I think you really need to break down what you define as modular. And again, Z Modular is obviously looking at the full envelope, the interiors, everything as a component piece that would be modular. Whereas I would say that the bulk of the industry and what we see, especially with multi-unit or student residences and retirement homes, you have a certain degree of modularity, but that modularity, that line's a little further back. So you're looking at very modular core slab steel, structural elements. You're looking at bathroom fixtures that you may be able to put the whole piece in. So there's a component set. If you're looking at modular as in everything is fabricated off-site, I mean, there's always going to be something fabricated on-site, but it's just defining where that degree is. And so I would say that even in the transit sector, modularity is key. So coming back to that platform enclosure that was proposed, the intent had always been that it was going to be a set of modular parts assembled and then just dropped on top of the tracks, because you can't. It's a live rail corridor. It has to rely on prefabrication and modularity. But again, so once you had 3 contractors trying to resolve that, you realize, you need the complexities of Z Modular to be able to think your way through how that works, right? It's difficult, and it's new.
I don't think, I mean, today's architects and technologists coming into the workforce, they get the maximum exposure to, the modular fabrication workflow that Z Modular is doing. I mean, do you see having to onboard your staff, I mean, for the future and understanding modular practice a lot more in depth? I mean, it's so out of the traditional workflow because it's assembly based, and today's architecture is still a lot line drawing based today. So, I mean, how do you get your mind out of that old practice?
Well, it starts with the client, and that there's going to be there's certain clients and building programs that are absolutely fitting, that sort of modularity. And Aziz mentioned hotels. There was a great great book, Prefabricated House, which really explored all of that, and it talked about really where it had been successful. And I think it was like the Motel 6 or one large chain, which actually came very close to the sort of dream scenario of modular production, because they had this great volume of repetitive and with degrees of customization that happened at each site. and they had a marketplace to do it. It really was a great marriage between the two. And it's my nightmare because the architects are cut out of that. This there goes those fees. So I think we're out.
I don't know if architects are out completely, but I think it's coming up with a new way of design and using technology to create new space plans or just new iterations of the architecture together that works on an assembly line. But I got a couple more questions here that I want to go through for both of you. So this question here, do you use Revit models from consultants, or are you modeling from scratch to create all the modulars? And how do you handle change notices? Do you need to recreate the modular for the particular section for a small change? So that's a pretty loaded question for you, Aziz. Yeah. How do you deal with consultants in the chaotic world of change orders in architecture? What do you do? I know you mentioned BIM 360, but how do you manage all that work and communication?
Right. So what happens is when we have a project where the architect originally designs the building and then that has to go through a modular process of translation, then it gets a bit difficult, but we do get to break it down into modular, right? But BIM 360 becomes very key in this platform. What happens is we onboard the consultant, we get the consultant model, we take the consultant model as the baseline model, and then we start breaking it down into our modular metrics and then start putting our modular model replacing the parts of the building, right? So then the consultant is seeing the modular shop model being developed in collaboration with their model. So as it keeps replacing, then the consultant becomes part of the shop model treatment. And as it goes through the approval level, the consultant basically is part of that approval level of the design is being properly translated and being productively used for production or not, right? So this way, what happens is the consultant model is the schematic design, and then it goes through design development to translate itself into a modular system. And then the modular model of our shop model continues as the single source of truth for the permit and for the production and the building maintenance.
Interesting. I mean, Richard, do you have any comments, I guess, on your end from, your projects dealing with consultants? Do you take a very integrated approach with their engineering models, or do you guys still create a clear division with the models and kind of works a little bit behind your own walls? Richard?
Sorry, it's actually far more integrated. In the design build, we see that the contractor is really driving a lot of these decisions. So you have to be on board. So there's two sides to it. One is that all consultants really need to, you don't have any sort of power struggles. You know what you've got to do. The contractor is really holding a lot of the reins in this, and you know where your lines of control and influence lie. The other side to it is, rather than changes, it works the other way around. The contractor will decide what needs to go in, and you'll actually change your model around what the contractor wants to build. So, for example, on the Rutherford set, we're well into construction. Maybe 50% along, and we haven't issued the IFC set yet. The definition of IFC is usually issued that before you start construction. And the way that it works now is that all of the trades will input shop drawings, details, materials into your model. And so ideally they would be the ones inputting it, but ultimately we end up incorporating that information. So we actually bend towards the changes as opposed to changes around our decisions.
Great. Ian, you said there was a couple more questions. If you can go ahead and read them out to us.
There's some questions here for Richard. So one of the slides you showed was sort of, here's the site plan you were given and here's where you ended up. How much back and forth was required to get you there?
Oh, 8 months worth.
Wow.
We, again, because it's such a large site, you can't see a lot of the things that changed. I mean, obviously the platform enclosure changed, the location of the structure or the parking structure changed. We had to move the GO station outside of the parameters of the parking structure for code compliance. We needed the fire separation between the two. Again, the layout and proportion of the parking structure was revised for efficiency. Site circulation was adjusted where the ramps are. So, there's a huge amount of adjustments, some small, some large. Again, we may receive an addendum and a clarification that no, we want this canopy structure to be here, or we may propose it there because it's cheaper, and they say no. For example, the fins that was actually a non-compliant because it specifically asked for horizontal. It was non-compliant right up until the end when they finally said yeah, and they issued an addendum that agreed to it. So we were at 100% risk there. We would have had to redesign and change everything. So in terms of the site plan, and even this, we had to test the auto turn, all of those radiuses and layouts. They changed quite a bit, although we did end up still pretty close. I mean, they weren't far off. There's only so many ways to fit all of that onto the site. So,
and these changes must be happening very quickly. Is it like weekly design meetings where things are coming in?
Weekly. Absolutely. You have a weekly design meeting. You see the change, and like I said, usually it comes out of the PSOS on Friday, and you have to get those changes in by the next coordination meeting. So you are moving fast. It depends on the size of them. Sometimes it'll be a little bit longer, but it's very, very quick. And I think that's good and bad. You want it to be quick because you're working at cost. Everyone sighs collectively when you have an extension. Oh, yeah. Could be doing this for longer.
So we got another question here. Ian, you want to read the construction surveyors?
Sure, let me find that. There we go. Do construction surveyors need to learn Revit or BIM or Assemble, which is something we haven't talked about today, so you can extract information that's missing on plans or difficult curves, slopes, etc., to do proper layout?
So I think that Aziz and Richard, maybe you guys want to, Aziz, maybe since you guys are even on the construction side.
Well, in terms of the construction layout and site utility and how surveyors work, there's a lot of improvement in terms of software technology in that way also, right? And then what Revit does is, even though the way we develop our models, individual modules maintain a 0-0 origin for the robotics to manufacture the module, the site model is actually based on the real geodetic coordinate system. So basically from the site model, you can link the civil 3D model of the topography, and you can basically get a full survey point system layout for the site to dictate where which unit or where what is happening at the site. So again, a full digital environment, it just leverages the softwares and the tools that different trades and different disciplines can tap into with the same source of truth and same data that is attached to the models, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. I'm gonna maybe we're gonna just give a question here to wrap it up. Maybe both Richard and Aziz can give their input. For anyone, we usually have a lot of students who are participating in our Revit Pub Nights. What advice do you have for anyone entering, architectural practices or Z-modular fabrication, modular design? What advice can you give, future prospects? What should they learn for the future? Other than BIM and Revit, but what other advice can you guys give?
Well, from our chair and the architectural side, BIM and Revit are always great tools. I think one of the things that people tend to focus on is the tools themselves and not what you're actually doing with the tools. We'd always strongly recommend an understanding of what the tools are actually yielding as a deliverable, yielding as a product. Where do they go with that? So parametrics is another thing that you sort of see in school a lot. How to work complex geometries and where that actually plays in. But as a marketplace, how does that actually tie into project delivery, working drawings, and the number of projects in which you'll actually get to exist in that digital world. So I think from a document side, you really have to understand what it is that you're producing from the contractor's eyes. What is it that you're actually trying to communicate? These are drawings, and but like they say, any drawing without a dimension is art. So you really need to have something of value that you're communicating to someone who's going to create something from it. So understanding the relationship between the tool that you're using, because it's very easy to get wrapped up in your own model. We've had this in our office as well, where people, really fell in love with their models, and the models are spectacular, but it was very hard to, it wasn't structured or actually translatable into a set of drawings. So, I would suggest understanding that relationship if you're getting into the digital world.
Right. Great. Thank you. Aziz, anything that you can advise for future prospects entering your industry?
Right. The one thing I would start by saying is, for the students and people trying to get into this new realm of modular world, is think for the new normal. Don't think outside the box. Don't think what has been the normal, but think what can be achieved. There is a very fine line between the way the modular industry is being perceived. Most of the people start thinking that it is a repetitive, simple box structure, but it is not. What we are trying to develop here is automation for the best of the manufacturing with machine learning and generative design. What we are trying to establish is let the machine do what machine is best at, and let the human do what the human is best at, right? So the design could be unlimited. For a robot trying to put a jig together, a system together, it doesn't matter. The recipe is the same, or every piece is a different one. The skill is the same for a robot, right? So the imagination can be beyond what is possible now. And with the advancement in manufacturing and assembly industry, in the industrial design, this is the time when architecture and industrial design is getting merged together. There are new disciplines entering our realm of architecture. And the collaborative work that we do, a lot get automation in the design process has never been possible before. And here is what we are trying to not only create a new language of design expression, but collaborating with the machine to learn from each other.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great way to kind of sum up everything that we are presenting today. I really like that word that you're using, merging, of what you just said, two different disciplines coming into one new process altogether. So with that, I'm going to leave it to Ian to kind of wrap up this great virtual Revit Pub Night. Ian,
I want to get one more question in for Richard. There's two more that are sort of sitting there, and we've still got a few more minutes. And they're sort of the same question, so I'm going to try and combine them as best as I can. So the question is, people see the benefits of using CAD in the pursuit phase when there's no guarantee on whether the project's going to move forward. But then once you've sort of gone through that phase and are moving into working in Revit, what are your thoughts on that transition? Are there ways that Revit could be improved that makes that transition from CAD into 3D BIM better? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think Revit is continually improving in regards to its use as a design and iterative tool, as opposed to a production tool. And I think, you sort of see this at higher, levels of sophistication with the users. And, it's something that we aspire to in the firm, obviously, is that we want to be able to use Revit. I mean, when we first started using Revit, we just had this wonderful dream scenario where this one platform was going to provide our renderings, our 3D illustrations, our working drawings, and our design sketches. This was amazing. And so understanding the limitations of that and how each phase of the project requires different elements from the model. What I think we're trying to engage is in how we can streamline that Revit approach. I mean, and what tools we need to have in advance, what we actually need to invest in. So, for example, generic families that we're putting in, a wall is a wall, doesn't actually need to be prescribed with, what the actual assembly is or anything like that. We actually really dumb down the Revit model for geometry, just so that changes can be done fast. And inevitably, at the end of the day, we'll still have that geometry to start building information into. So it really is defining the level of intelligence of that model at the onset and seeing if we can't sketch on that. And there are a lot of sketching tools within that design review. I think there's options as well that you can actually freeze components on that and start redesigning one element. And there's lots of tools that allow us to do that. And it's just a matter of, bringing together our working method, how the firm operates, with how the tools work best. So I don't see, I mean, CAD is, you haven't seen a whole lot of changes in CAD. Not nearly as fast as you have in the 3D world in BIM. So I would think that BIM is going to absorb those skill sets, and so that you really will be using that one platform, and then being empowered with how much information you need to at whatever given phase, and that'll really help that transition. So, or eliminate that transition. It won't be a transition; just be this fluid move from DD into CD.
Right. Like what you said, there were these early thoughts of this is going to be the perfect platform. If only technology really worked that way, where there was one software to solve all your problems. I know Aziz would love that solution too, right? One thing to solve everyone's problems. So we are about out of time. So I would like to thank Richard, thank Aziz, and Dan. His camera's off, but thank you, Stan, for working this one. It was great to have both your presentations. Were wonderful, very insightful. We had a ton of great questions, which is great to see. A lot of audience participation there. One thing to note is I believe there's a survey that would have been emailed out to everybody who registered and actually attended. If you could take some time to fill out that survey, the feedback is greatly appreciated as we try to iterate on these. This is only our second virtual session. We're always looking for ways to improve it and refine it, make it better. So if you take some time to fill that out, that would be great. So yeah, thank you everybody for attending. Take some time out of your Thursday afternoon, and we'll sign off now.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, SolidCAD. And
bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.